I wanted to do this video before having a good stout meal. I'm thinking of doing some mushrooms and some ham, maybe throwing some eggs in there too. A good keto meal. It reminds me a lot of Robin Hood. So I've been reading this Robin Hood. It's the unabridged. I've always wondered, what's the actual story? Because if you read some of the newer stuff or listen to or watch some of the new movies, like this one by Russell Crowe, it's one of my favorites. It's great. So manly. I mean, like, there's so much virtue in that guy, integrity. A good, honest fool is what Richard the Lionheart calls him. Or you have something like this, a great episode series where it's just every episode could honestly stand on its own. It's like, yeah, they're just having a good merry time. Or you have the original Hollywood one, which is like the classic story and plot with Richard the Lionhearted coming back from the Crusades and Prince John trying to usurp his throne. Well, in this one, what surprised me off the bat was that there really isn't a plot until until I started getting towards the end of the book, which I'm almost done. And it's only at this point where it first even mentions is like Richard the Lionhearted. I'm like, oh, so there actually is a Richard the Lionhearted. Because up to this point, it's only been like King Henry. It's like, who's this King Henry guy? But it's so far been mostly just encounters of Robin Hood, how he, gained his merry band, his code of ethics that he lives by, but then just his encounters like with, not the king's men, but like just like stealing from, the rich and giving to the poor, lots of those types of scenarios. But then like more encounters than just like Friar Tuck. Like there's so many other friars and churchmen that are in this book, and it's just awesome. It's just like, there's just so much like Catholic culture in here, like without even trying, or at least it was just understood at that time period. So it's really cool to see. It's really, really cool to see. And they're constantly jabbing each other, and it's great. Oh, man. But in merry England, in the time of old, there lived within the green glades of Sherwood Forest near Nottingham town a famous outlaw whose name was Robin Hood. Well, I'd like to contrast this book with another one. So, this is Theology of the Body by John Paul II. Theology of the Body. So, what does JP2 try to do in this? If I were to sum this book up, and I got to read the whole thing for class. I forgot which year I took it, but I took it at Stubbe. Awesome professor. If I were to sum it up, John Paul II is trying to infuse faith and meaning into human sexuality, right? There's so much there, and there's so much to be understood within a biblical context, but then in a theological context within an understanding of the person's dignity, an understanding of the other. There's so much here that if you don't really take the time to think about it, or you don't even have a reference, you would miss this entirely. One of the reasons I bring this up and cross-reference these two is that what is really important is reclaiming the definitions of words, not letting the definitions of words slip away from us. I think that's where we can really see these two kind of, in how they work together. So, what do you think of when you first hear the word reading rainbow? Maybe you remember it, maybe you don't. But honestly, that's what I feel like right now. I feel like the guy from Reading Rainbow. But then what if I just say rainbow? Well, then you're going to think of something entirely different. Well, what if I say rainbow in a biblical context? Then you're thinking of, hopefully, Noah, right? And God's covenantal faithfulness, right? That's something entirely different. With Robin Hood, there are so many different words that are used. It's in good old English, right? It's in good old English. There's so many words like, I never heard of things like, you've probably heard of the word yesterday. Well, what about the word yesternight? How awesome of a word is that? That is so cool. Like, I want to use that more often, yesternight. Yesternight, I had a great hearty meal. That's so cool. I just love that. And this thing has pictures too. But today, we let the meanings of words slip away from us. What is it? Every single year, it seems like words in Webster's dictionary are updated, their definitions. And it's like, what's going on here? We got to fight for this stuff. I mean, words have meaning. And if you allow the words and their definitions to change, this has actually very large consequences. And so in terms of human sexuality and morals, if we allow words to and their definitions to slip away from us, we're going to find ourselves in a completely different era. And we are finding ourselves in a completely different era. And that's why I just love coming back to something like this. It's like, they talk about, so many things so freely in here that you just wouldn't even feel comfortable, even saying, in a public context nowadays. So for what it's worth, point being, subscribe to the channel right over here, and don't forget to fight for words. So now, I'm just gonna get to my good book and a nice root beer.